Rochus Misch was closer to Adolf Hitler than anyone else. As his personal bodyguard and telephone operator, Misch observed the dictator not only as a leader, but also as a human being, unpredictable, charming, merciless, and sometimes disturbingly normal. Now, Misch reveals hidden truths that dispel myths and show a side of Hitler that the world never fully understood. From secret conversations in the Reich Chancellery to quiet moments in the bunker, Misch's stories are stunning. Entry into the Fuhrer's service. Rochus Misch's rise into Adolf Hitler's inner circle was more accidental than the result of strong political conviction. Misch was born in 1917 in what is now Poland, lost both parents at an early age, and was raised by his grandparents. Like many young men in Germany in the 1930s, he was swept up in the wave of nationalism and joined the SS in 1937, the paramilitary organization of the Nazi Party. This decision was motivated more by a need for security and belonging than by genuine political conviction. The SS promised young recruits like Misch a stable life, regular pay, and a sense of belonging at a time when Germany was struggling with the aftermath of World War I and the economic problems of the Weimar Republic. His life changed dramatically in 1938 when he was selected for the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, an elite unit created as Hitler's personal guard. This was a special assignment. The Leibstandarte operated at the highest levels of the Nazi regime and consisted only of men who were considered absolutely loyal to Hitler. To become a member, one had to be physically fit, obedient, and demonstrate unwavering devotion to the Nazi cause, or at least convincingly pretend to do so. This unit not only accompanied Hitler at public events, but also protected him during private meetings, and was constantly present among the top officials of the Third Reich. In 1940, at the age of just 23, Misch found himself at the very heart of Hitler's security service, working closely with one of history's most infamous figures. He became one of the few people who could move freely between Hitler's various headquarters. As Hitler's personal bodyguard, courier, and later communications officer, Misch was not only a witness to the regime's downfall, but was also deeply involved in its inner workings. This closeness to Hitler influenced Misch's entire life and determined his legacy. Daily life in Hitler's circle. Rochus Misch was no ordinary bodyguard. He worked at the very heart of the Nazi regime, in private rooms and secured bunkers where key decisions of World War II were made. His role went far beyond mere protection. Misch was responsible for maintaining Hitler's personal communication systems, securing telephone lines, relaying urgent military messages, and operating encrypted radio equipment. This role gave him access to some of the most secret operations of the Nazi war machine. From 1940 to the fall of the Third Reich in 1945, Misch was present at almost all of Hitler's military headquarters, including the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, the Berghof in the Bavarian Alps, and especially the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia, Hitler's main command post on the Eastern Front. It was there in July 1944 that he narrowly escaped Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg's assassination attempt, one of the most famous conspiracies against Hitler. After the explosion, Misch witnessed the chaos that erupted and the tightening of control over Hitler's inner circle. Despite the horrors of the regime he served, Misch claimed after the war that he knew nothing about the atrocities committed throughout Europe. He insisted that he was a loyal soldier who merely followed orders and had no idea about the Holocaust or the Nazis' extermination policies. However, his proximity to power raises serious doubts about these claims. Misch often received urgent messages from the front and sat near rooms where high-level strategic meetings were held, attended by figures like Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, Hermann Göring, and Albert Speer. He watched these men who sometimes panicked, other times remained calm as the war turned against Germany. As the country collapsed, his position as a silent witness became increasingly dangerous and demanding. Inside the bunker in Hitler's final days. In April 1945, the mighty Nazi regime was collapsing. Berlin, the center of Hitler's empire, was surrounded by Soviet forces advancing through the suburbs. The war in Europe was nearly over, and the German army was in full retreat. Amid the chaos, Adolf Hitler decided to withdraw from public life and hide deep beneath the Reich Chancellery in the Fuhrer bunker, a heavily fortified underground complex designed as a shelter and command post in crisis situations. Rochus Misch followed Hitler into this hidden final refuge, not knowing he was entering one of the most famous scenes in history. Once inside the bunker, the situation became oppressive. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with tension and paranoia. Hitler, a mere shadow of the man who once led armies across Europe, spent his final days issuing senseless orders and obsessing over imaginary betrayals. He refused to see the reality of Germany's defeat and blamed alleged treachery instead of the undeniable strength of the Allies. Rochus Misch remained at his post, operating the bunker's vital communication systems, while Soviet artillery intensified and reports from the front became increasingly bleak. Daily tasks soon began to seem surreal. Outside, the city was burning. Inside, Nazi leaders desperately clung to their fading power, even as everything around them crumbled. By late April, most of Berlin's defenders were either dead, captured, or fleeing. The city had transformed into a place of desperation, and the bunker now resembled more of a prison than a fortress. Inside remained Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, and Martin Bormann, his personal secretary, unwaveringly loyal. But even their devotion could not mask the inevitable. The Third Reich was finished. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide in the Fuhrer bunker. The final scene in the Fuhrer's bunker. In the underground bunker where Adolf Hitler breathed his last, the tragic end unfolded on April 30th, 1945. Eva Braun swallowed poison, while Hitler, according to most accounts, committed suicide by gunshot. Rochus Misch was just a few rooms away when it happened. Shortly after, he witnessed the grim sight of bodies wrapped in blankets being carried past him to the garden above the bunker. According to Hitler's specific instructions, the bodies were placed in a shallow pit, doused with gasoline, and set ablaze. The goal was to prevent the Soviet army from taking their remains as gruesome trophies. Misch remained in the bunker for 3 more days after Hitler's death. The atmosphere became heavy with fear and despair as supplies ran out and the sounds of battle drew closer. Finally, with nowhere left to flee and Soviet units advancing, Rochus Misch decided to escape. But his journey into Soviet captivity was only the beginning of nearly 10 years of struggle and a vow of silence about his experiences. 9 years of interrogations and isolation. After Rochus Misch left the safety of the bunker where he had spent the final days of the Third Reich, he was quickly captured by advancing Soviet forces. As Adolf Hitler's personal bodyguard and telephone operator, Misch was a prisoner of great significance. Soviet military intelligence saw him as someone who could reveal secrets about Hitler's behavior, his inner circle, and even hidden war plans. For this reason, Misch was subjected to relentless interrogations. For nearly 10 years, he was moved between various Soviet labor camps and high-security prisons. Conditions were harsh. Brutal winters, forced labor, lack of food, and almost no contact with the outside world. Interrogations were frequent and exhausting. Soviet authorities wanted to know everything: Hitler's mental state in his final days, the daily routine in the bunker, the actions and conversations of other key Nazi figures, and any secrets that might have remained hidden after the Reich's collapse. Misch told them what he could, but often insisted he knew little about what happened outside his immediate surroundings. In 1954, nearly 10 years after his arrest, Misch was unexpectedly released. He returned to a changed West Berlin, a city now divided by Cold War tensions. Despite the political turmoil and scars from imprisonment, Misch quietly reintegrated into civilian life. He opened a small shop and decided to live in the same neighborhood where he had grown up, as if trying to reclaim a piece of his old life. For many years, he stayed out of the public eye. Unlike other former Nazis who faced prosecution or went into hiding, Misch remained in the city. He kept a low profile, avoided interviews, and rarely spoke about his wartime experiences. Some believed he escaped punishment simply because he held no significant rank and made no important decisions. Others thought it was because he was careful, revealed very little during interrogations, and remained silent long afterward. In the following years, Misch became something of an enigma, a man who had once stood beside one of history's most infamous dictators, yet managed to fade into the background. His story remained largely unknown for a long time, but what he chose to reveal was as revealing as what he chose to conceal. The man who never betrayed the boss. At the beginning of the 21st century, Rochus Misch suddenly found himself back in the public spotlight. As the last living member of Adolf Hitler's inner circle, Misch began giving interviews, appearing in documentaries, and published memoirs titled The Last Witness. For many, this was a rare opportunity to hear first-hand accounts of life in Hitler's bunker during the final days of the Third Reich. What shocked people most, however, was not only what he remembered, but also how he expressed it. Misch spoke about his time with Hitler in an unexpectedly warm and nostalgic tone. He insisted he was merely doing his job and felt no guilt or remorse. In a 2005 interview with the Associated Press, he was asked the obvious question, "Did Hitler ever mention the Holocaust?" His response was direct and disturbing. That was never a topic. Never. He didn't deny the Holocaust's existence but distanced himself from it, claiming he never heard Hitler speak about it. 4 years later, in a 2009 BBC interview, he returned to the topic and elaborated slightly. He admitted he knew about concentration camps, even naming Dachau, the first Nazi camp opened in 1933. Still, he insisted he had no idea about the horrors that took place there. According to him, "I knew about Dachau and concentration camps in general, but I had no idea about their scope. It wasn't part of our conversations." When asked if he regretted working so closely with Hitler, both as his personal bodyguard and as a member of his communications team, Misch responded in a way that surprised many. "He was a great boss. I lived with him for 5 years. We were the people who worked closest to him. He was never without us, day or night." This unwavering loyalty wasn't just mentioned in interviews. It was also the core of his memoir, The Last Witness. In the book, he portrayed himself as a loyal servant who merely followed orders and didn't interfere in politics. He provided insights into Hitler's daily life but avoided any deeper moral questions regarding the Nazi regime. He never admitted complicity, nor considered whether proximity to power carries responsibility. Instead, he portrayed his years with Hitler as merely an odd office job, where his experience was just a normal workday. For some, especially in Germany and parts of Eastern Europe, Misch was seen as a relic of a dark past, a man who witnessed unimaginable history but chose to ignore it. His supporters portrayed him as a soldier who found himself in a situation beyond his control and who merely followed orders to survive. Critics, however, argued that this excuse was not only inadequate, but also dangerous. They accused Misch of using his loyalty to Hitler to avoid responsibility for his role, however small, within a criminal regime. By calling Hitler a great boss and presenting himself as apolitical, Misch seemingly avoided the moral reckoning that others faced after the war. And shortly after these interviews and his book were published, the inevitable backlash followed. The end of the faithful soldier. Rochus Misch died on September 5, 2013, at the age of 96. His death marked the loss of a direct connection to one of the darkest and most infamous chapters in modern history. When Misch died, he left behind no dramatic final words. There were no words of regret, no apology, no hint of seeking forgiveness for his support of the Nazi regime. In life and death, Misch remained loyal and silent about the regime he served. For historians and researchers studying World War II and the Holocaust, his death felt like closing a door, a permanent farewell to someone who witnessed events that tragically shaped the 20th century. Misch took his secrets and true feelings to the grave, or so everyone believed. This assumption persisted for more than 10 years, until a shocking letter emerged that stunned the entire world. The letter that changed everything. In early 2025, construction workers performing routine repairs in an old abandoned apartment made a shocking discovery that shook the historical community. The apartment had once been home to Rochus Misch. When workers removed part of the insulation from a wall, they found a hidden metal container, airtight and securely sealed, that hadn't been opened for years. Inside, they discovered a folded yellowed envelope that was old but remarkably preserved. It was written in German and dated late 2012, just months before Misch's death. The letter was signed simply, Rochus Misch. Its opening sentence was chilling. "I can no longer remain silent." This letter contradicted everything Misch had publicly declared for decades. It described horrific events he witnessed during his service in Hitler's inner circle, events that haunted him for years. Misch admitted he had lied to protect himself. Though he always claimed he knew nothing about the regime's worst crimes, this final letter revealed a much more disturbing truth. He wrote about political enemies and suspected traitors who were buried alive in remote wooded areas and executed without mercy or trial. According to him, Hitler himself sometimes watched these murders from behind protective glass. Misch vividly recalled moments when victims clawed at the earth and screamed while Hitler calmly watched. He remembered Hitler smiling and saying, "Justice sleeps best underground." Misch detailed horrific poison experiments on prisoners that were conducted on Hitler's orders. He stated that Hitler not only watched the experiments, but also took notes and insisted on timing tests. The tests were repeated, causing suffering to the prisoners. Misch claimed he was present at some of these experiments, but insisted he didn't directly participate. The most disturbing part of the letter concerned the murder of a young girl who had been given to Hitler by a high-ranking officer as a gesture of loyalty. A few days later, the girl was found dead in woods near the Berghof, Hitler's mountain residence. Officially, the death was labeled as an enemy attack, but Misch believed Hitler ordered her death to eliminate a potential threat. He claimed the incident was carefully concealed in SS archives. Throughout the letter, Misch emphasized the impact of these events on his personal life. He wrote about being tormented by nightmares, unable to sleep, and hearing the voices of victims. "At night I see their faces," he wrote. He carried this guilt for decades, telling himself he was just a guard, a mere observer. But as he aged, the memories became heavier and heavier. The letter showed he could no longer reconcile what he witnessed with the image he tried to create. He concluded with a powerful confession. "I lied to protect myself, but silence is a form of guilt. Let the truth now be revealed, even though it's too late." Experts who examined the container and letter believe they were deliberately hidden to remain undiscovered until long after Misch's death. The preservation method suggests Misch wanted the truth to come out, but only when he could no longer be held accountable. The world grapples with Misch's final words. Although the document's contents haven't been officially released, insiders confirm that serious discussions are taking place at both federal and state levels. These discussions focus on three main areas: verifying the document's authenticity, accurately translating its contents, and deciding whether it should be made public. This process is expected to be complex and closely monitored. Holocaust survivors and education advocates are calling for complete transparency. They believe that if the letter is confirmed as authentic, it could reveal crucial information about Adolf Hitler's actions and the inner workings of the Third Reich. Some experts believe the details mentioned in the letter could lead to the discovery of hidden documents or unknown witnesses to key historical events. However, opinions differ on how to handle the letter. Some historians urge caution, warning that hasty conclusions without full verification could cause further problems. A small group of critics is skeptical about how the letter was found and questions the motives of the construction workers who discovered it. They suggest the workers may be seeking publicity or financial gain. The workers' supervisor has rejected these claims, insisting they immediately turned the letter over to authorities and never intended to create a media sensation. However, suspicion persists in certain circles. Amid this ongoing debate, several independent sources involved in the investigation have privately stated that the letter is probably authentic. One source familiar with parts of the letter claims it contains details that only someone who was present could know, suggesting its authenticity. The public is in an uproar, captivated by the letter that has begun appearing on the internet. Many eagerly await its full release, which promises to shed more light on its contents. One thing is clear: Rochus Misch, who spent his entire life denying his responsibility in defending Hitler, may have finally revealed the most terrifying truths in a way that makes him accountable. A posthumous admission of guilt he never faced during his lifetime. What do you think about Misch's letter? Share your comments with us below. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.